Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. Following on from last week where we looked at noses, this week we're going to be looking at the basic forms and how to approach drawing mouths, primarily from a frontal or a sort of three-quarter view. So begin just by thinking about the major forms that tend to make up mouths, and then I'll go on and just kind of do a demonstration of how you might build it. And the main thing is I'm just going to go over the kind of key things to look out for. As with noses, mouths vary a lot depending on the subject. So you do get a lot of variation in terms of thinness of lips, the kind of width of different parts of the lips, the value of the lips will shift, how shiny they are will depend on different circumstances. There's loads of variations, but this is just a general overview to get you guys familiar with the major forms, and then give you a bit of an approach to how you could go about drawing them. So to begin with, we're going to think about what forms make up the lips, and the kind of starting point is a kind of almost heart-shaped form in the center of the top lip. So that's where you see the philtrum begins. So if you think that little crease that runs kind of between the nose and the top lip, that curve tends to be defined by this form here. And how sharp, how kind of pointy or how soft it is, it varies, so that's a variable. But mainly we want to think about the fact it tends to kind of have an effect where the bottom of it will be a similar curve to the top, and it tends to kind of bulge out, have its own sort of little bulge that then connects to the form that sits next to it, which is another, if you kind of think of these as little sort of pillow shapes, is useful. So this form connects here. I'll drop this down to be a little bit lower to make room for the next forms. And then, because it's sort of symmetrical, we've got our next kind of pillowy form on the right hand side. Just make sure it's reasonably sharp for you guys. So I'm not worrying too much about how I'm drawing this, I just want to kind of make these distinct for you. So this then becomes the corner, these are the sort of corners of our mouth. This is the central form that is defined by the philtrum, and then these are the kind of side forms that sit either side of the center, kind of Cupid's bow. And then under that we've got two forms that meet at the center, and they tend to kind of dip down to make way for the bottom of that bow shape. And that becomes the kind of center of the mouth. So we've got our corner of the mouth still, and these drop down, something like this. So this becomes the center line of the mouth. Then we've got the top lips, which connect up to philtrum. Corner of the mouth, which is usually kind of marked by a crease, and then the bottom lips, which project out and cast a little shadow form kind of below them usually, and then the cheek kind of builds out of that, sorry, not the cheek, the chin builds out of that point there, connects to the rest of the jaw, and so on. So you get the idea of how those lips would sit. It's obviously very exaggerated, but gives you a reasonable idea of how you could kind of start to conceptualize the forms of the mouth. The other thing I want you to think about with the mouth is that it doesn't sit on a flat plane. So this is, say, a frontal view, but if we were looking at the mouth in a three-quarter view, we want to think about the fact it kind of wraps around a bit, and this is really obvious if you kind of touch your mouth and you kind of feel the jaw. You know that your jawbone kind of bends a lot around, and your mouth kind of sits over a reasonable kind of section of your jawbone. So if you imagine those forms mapped onto this curving plane, we'd have our bow shape in here. So you'd see a little bit more of this near side, and then we'd see more of this near side here, and then those bottom forms underneath. So you can see they start to wrap around. They're not sitting flat on the face. They're curving with the face. So it's important to think of it in those terms. So bearing this in mind, let's have a look at working from a reference and kind of how we would start to model the forms reasonably accurately. So I'm going to get the reference up on screen now and then get started. I've just kind of cropped it in to roughly where the mouth is. So you'll note kind of beyond the general forms that we're thinking about, a good starting point is to just look for the shadow shapes, as always, just like we did with the nose. So you can see the shadow shape underneath the bottom lip is pretty defined. And I would generally start with that shadow shape. So I just kind of lightly sketch that in. Get a reasonable approximation of that shadow shape. Can even lightly shade it in if need be. Then I can look for the shadow shape made by the form of the lips turning. So that's an example of the fact that the lips curve around the mouth. Kind of starting to connect these shadows up. So if this is the bottom, this point here is the kind of center of the bottom of the lips. You can imagine a line kind of running up through there. That hits the crease in the center of the Cupid's bow form in the top lip. We can really lightly put in the philtrum just there. So I'm gonna darken this in a moment. Might not be too visible for you right now. And I can see that the top, or the point where that form starts to turn back, rests kind of just above where the shadow stops. And I can see that the corner of the mouth sits a bit lower than the center. So let's say about there. You can see it's starting to kind of sketch in fairly nicely. I might actually just zoom in a little bit, so I'm going to stop the recording and readjust my camera a bit. So hopefully this will be a little bit easier for you guys to see. So I've got everything kind of lightly sketched in, which is how I would go about starting this kind of sketch. It's just a tiny little bit of shadow, and then that almost disappears, that shadow, where it becomes kind of more of a half tone at the top of this lip. And then I can kind of look for the symmetry in this, so just give it a sense of the corner of the mouth will tend to have a kind of fairly dark portion like this, you can see. So I'm going to put the darkest notes in now, which will be core of the corner of the mouth, the central point, and core of this other corner of the mouth. It also goes pretty dark, though maybe not quite as dark, and the shadow cast underneath the lip. And then this top lip is going a lot darker than the bottom lip. Start to build that form up. So you can see I've not had to do a great deal to get the forms of the mouth working. I've mainly just looked for those shadows. And then even without working at all in the halftones, just working with these shadows, it's working pretty well generally, so I'm pretty happy with it. So those shadows working pretty well now. So I can start to look at the halftones. So if I'm thinking about those forms, we know that the center of the lip from our earlier investigation and just observing it right now, it becomes a kind of like a point where there's a separation in the quite a distinct separation in value. So this form on this side is just a lot lighter generally, essentially. Not probably, it wouldn't be totally white because it is still a lip. We would want a bit of room to have enough value to make it clear that this is still going to be like a reddish colour, and as we know, reddish colours are always darker in value than creamier skin would be, even though it might appear to be quite light. And then if we drop down to this bottom lip, we've got this quite sharp cast shadow coming across. Then again, it's kind of a fairly soft form emerging from the lip itself. We can play up the slight separation in those forms, like up there as well. And again, it's going to have a highlight. I'm going to put a little highlight in just here, but generally it's going to be off-white. It's not going to be the white of the paper because we need enough for this highlight that I'm putting in right now. But we also need enough range to then shift up to lighten the lighter forms of the skin on the model as well. But it's pretty much getting there. So you can see I've not developed much in terms of the forms surrounding the mouth at all. Could do a slight bit just there, but generally I've just worked on the mouth, and it emerges pretty well if you just kind of focus on these forms, look for those shadows, look for dark notes in the correct place. Keep things kind of controlled as you work, so don't add tone too aggressively. Yeah, it's starting to work pretty well. So I'll leave it at that for this one. It's a nice simple little drawing, nothing too complex the way that it's built up. So you guys can have a go at that yourself if you just find a reference to work from. So something lit reasonably easily, nothing too complex will be good. And as always, follow our channel for more videos like this and have a look through what we've already done. And if you want access to tutors for the work that you do create, follow the link through to the OCAD course page and you can sign up. But yeah, that's it for this week. I'll see you guys soon. We'll be working on probably eyes or something like that next week, something similar. So we've got a little bit of a series working with features. But yeah, that's it. I will see you guys soon.